Tonight, we are joined by author Martha Hall Kelly, who is the author of 3 books that have all been on the New York bestsellers list. First was Lilac Girls, followed by Lost Roses, and most recent is Sunflower Sisters, a large part of which takes place in St. Mary's County. So we are very honored to have Martha with us tonight to talk about her books, her process, and all of the history that she brought into all of these books. Good evening, Martha. Hello.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. This is so fun. Nowadays, we don't get to really be together, so this is a wonderful replacement.
We appreciate you joining us down here in St. Mary's County because you are up in Connecticut, I believe.
Yes,
so.
Chile, Connecticut, yes.
We just had a big snowstorm.
It was right. All those people stuck on the highway. That was so awful.
Yes. So we do get snow down
home now. Are they off of the highway?
Yep. It got cleared up, and our roads are back in good condition. The library is open again today, so that's nice.
Oh, good.
Okay. So all 3 of your books have historic figures. It's women from the same family. And right now I'm showing something I borrowed from your website, which I would encourage everyone to go check out. This is the Woolsey family tree, and all of these are real people. So could you tell us, please, about the setting for each of your books and which Woolsey woman is featured in them?
Wow. First of all, this slide is so helpful. I put this on social media and people were saying, can I get this somehow? Because no one else has figured out how to do this quite so well. So thank you for doing that.
You're welcome.
Lilac Girls was the first one, and that is a World War II book. And the setting actually has 3 settings. It is New York. That's where Caroline worked at the embassy there, the U.S. Embassy. And it is set also in Connecticut, up at near where I live now, at her house called The Hay in Bethlehem, Connecticut. But it's also set in Germany during World War II at Ravensbrück concentration camp. And then in Poland after the war. And it's also, there are some scenes in France, in Paris. So I went to all of those settings to research, which was really fun, especially the Paris part.
Sure.
And then Lost Roses is set in Russia. And so I went to Russia. This is back pre-COVID when I can, go anywhere. And I spent a lot of time in Russia researching that, and also in Paris and in New York again, because Eliza, Caroline's mother, was living in New York and up at the Hay in Bethlehem, Connecticut. So some similar settings, but Russia definitely was a whole new ball game, and I'm really glad I got a chance to spend time there. But one of my favorite notes my editor sent me when she read Lost Roses was, "We love it, but we need more Paris." And I just thought, that's the thing that every author wants to hear, I think. We need more Paris. So I had to go back to Paris a second time and do more research there. And I'm glad I did. And then, of course, the latest book, Sunflower Sisters, takes place in New York City, where the Woolsey family, that's from whence everything came in terms of philanthropy for Eliza and Caroline Faraday. It all came from the Woolsey women. And they started in New York City. And of course, we also visit Gettysburg, and we spend a lot of time in St. Mary's County at what is Peeler Plantation in the book, but I based it on Sotterley Plantation. And so, those are the 3 books.
Oh, that's great. Now, the format that you use for each of these is that you have 3 main characters, and they each alternate by chapter, and they tell their story in the first person. And in each of these books, you do have one of the Woolsey women. So I think we mentioned for Lilac Girls, it was Caroline Faraday. And then The Lost Roses was her mother, Eliza Mitchell Faraday. And then who are we featuring in Sunflower Sisters?
And that's Georgie. She's the middle sister of all of these amazing Woolsey sisters.
And how did you find?
It was hard to pick because they were all so great.
I can imagine. How did you find them in the first place?
You mean to begin with?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, that goes way back to 2000 when it was one great Mother's Day when I had just lost my mother. And, you know, Mother's Day is tough when your own mom is not around, especially that first one. And so I was feeling very blue. And my husband said, why don't you go up and see that house you've always wanted to go see? And he said, I'll take care of the kids, just get in the car and go. And he was talking about the Bellamy Faraday House and Gardens, which in Lilac Girls, Caroline calls her home the Hay. And that's in Bethlehem, which is close to where I live now. And he knew I wanted to go see that house because I loved lilacs and my mom loved them. And I saw in Victoria Magazine, which I used to love, it's not being printed anymore, but it was a spread about Caroline's Incredible Lilacs was the name of it. And it showed her house, which is, you know, kind of that quintessential New England house, and the lilacs, and a little picture of Caroline as an actress. She was so beautiful. And I just was dying to go up to this house, which is about an hour north. But we had 3 little kids at the time. And so he did not have to ask me twice. I got in the car and drove up there. And the gardens were beautiful, but it was really the house tour that did it for me. When I saw Caroline's desk, and it's on the 2nd floor, just outside of her mother's bedroom, they have it just as she left it. And there was a photograph of 40 or so middle-aged ladies lined up for a photograph. And I asked the docent, who are those women? Because most everything else on her desk was it was all about France and Charles de Gaulle and Napoleon. And, you know, she had won all sorts of French honors. And here was this picture of these women. And the docent said, oh, those are the rabbits. They were Polish Catholic women who were political prisoners at Ravensbrück concentration camp in Germany, Hitler's only all-female concentration camp. And when Caroline found out that these women had been experimented on by the Nazi doctors there and nicknamed the rabbits, and when she found out about that from her friend Genevieve de Gaulle, Charles de Gaulle's niece, she took them under her wing and helped them. And I just thought, how did that story get lost? It's such an interesting story. So I started going up to the house and researching in the archives there, which are underneath the Welcome Center when you go to the house. And I had no intention of writing a book at all. And then that just kind of evolved. I moved to Atlanta and I dropped my son off in high school. He was in high school by the time I actually got around to writing something about it. And I went through the drive-through at Starbucks and ordered my usual decaf cappuccino grande. And by mistake, the barista gave me a caffeinated one, and I went home and started writing Lilac Girls. It just all started coming out because I've been researching for so long, and I'm not allowed to drink caffeine in my family because they, it makes me crabby. But that day I was super productive and this book just started coming out. So that was the story of how Lilac Girls happened. And then once that became, I guess, a hit, you would say. I mean, it's sold almost 2 million copies at this point.
Wow.
When I first realized that was happening, I knew I had to go back to Random House and pitch them on more books. So that's when I said, I've already done the research for Caroline's mother and her great-grandmother and her family. So why don't I write 2 more books that go back in time and talk about that? So that's where that came from. And I figured, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But with Lilac Girls, it was 3 points of view. So I tried to keep that structure. And I knew I wanted Eliza for Lost Roses because I knew that all around the house, there were all these religious icons and all sorts of things about Russia. And I couldn't figure out what's the connection with Russia? So once I put all of that together, I wrote Lost Roses. And then, of course, the Civil War, I was dying to get into, because in all of my research, the Woolsey woman would always come up, and there were so many pictures and 1,000 letters, literally 1,000 letters in the basement of the Bellamy Faraday house. And I really wanted to dig in and read all of them, which I ended up doing. And my eyesight, is it was worth it to sacrifice my eyesight, because it was really interesting reading all those letters. But so that's how it all came about. And choosing Georgie was hard, because I kind of fell in love with all of the different sisters. And it was a tough choice of 7, but I loved that she wanted so bad. In fiction, it's really important to have a want. And she wanted to open a school for nurses in such a desperate way. And so I thought, well, I think that would be really helpful to follow that. And yeah, and also her relationship with Frank Bacon, I thought was really interesting, and where he ended up. And so all of that was true. So yeah, I chose Georgie, and I'm really glad I did. Plus, I knew that she had gone to Gettysburg, and I wanted to have some scenes at Gettysburg, and I'm glad I did, because those are some of my favorite scenes in the book. But I knew that she had gone to Gettysburg because of the letters, but also I found on Amazon, of all places, a book called 3 Weeks at Gettysburg by Georgiana. And so I thought, well, she even wrote her own book about it. This is giving her an opportunity in a way to, be showcased. So, of course, when it came in the mail, I wish I had it around here. I mean, it was literally like this big. It has like 4 pages in it, but I used a lot of it, though. I mean, that's where all those scenes at the Gettysburg Depot come in. They actually made their own sanitary commission site right there, like their own mini hospital right there at the train station. So yeah, I thought all of that was interesting. And that's always my test. I always think, well, if I think it's interesting, probably somebody else out there will. So.
And I like the historical note that you have at the end of your book that explains what is historical, because there's so much, especially Georgiana Woolsey's life. It's remarkable. And I do want to insert one comment from Nancy. She says, the emotions of each female character come through your writing so clearly.
Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah, I like how you develop it.
Because that's hard for me. I don't know. Some people can do it super easily, but my daughter is always, one of my daughters, both of them read my manuscripts, but my daughter Mary is always telling me, Mom, how does she feel? How does she feel? Because I tend to, it's painful digging into some of those emotions. And it's easier, I think, as a writer to just kind of write the dialogue and, get through it. But she's really good at like bringing me back and saying, tell us how she felt at that point. So
that was good advice. Historical fiction is such a great genre because you get the history in there, but you put a face to it. And when you have the feelings in there, you can see them as real people, not just history book characters. So that's really great.
It's like time travel. I mean, if done well, I think it's like time travel.
No, I agree. Okay, so I want to talk a little more about Sunflower Sisters, especially the parts that are in St. Mary's County. So I borrowed another thing from your website, which is this really beautiful drawing by Holly Holland.
She's so good, isn't she? I love her stuff.
Yes. So this is showing the Peeler Plantation, where 2 of your main characters live. So why don't you tell us a little bit about this, please?
Sure. Do you want to know the background of how I set it at Sotterley?
Oh, yeah. How did you come to pick Sotterley Plantation as your peeler?
It was so weird. Sometimes I feel like at intervals when I've been doing research for all 3 of the books, these kind of serendipitous weird things happen. And I don't know why, but you can almost feel the the kind of electricity around when it's happening. I know it sounds crazy, but I was at an event for, I think it was Lilac Girls at the Bellamy Faraday House. Pre-COVID, we used to do events, a Christmas event and a spring event at the house, and it was always really fun. People would, show up and sign books, and they would decorate the house. It was really fun. Maybe we'll do it again someday. That would, knock on wood. But sometimes they have vendors come, and out on the grass, they would set up little tents and sell things. And so I was talking to one of the vendors, and I said, oh yeah, 2 books from now, I'm doing a Civil War book. And she said, oh, my great, great, great grandparents' father was enslaved at a plantation down in Maryland, and it was called Sotterley. And his name was Kane. Her name's Kathy Kane. And I just thought it was just the most wonderful gift, because I was struggling to figure out what kind of a plantation. I had been living in Atlanta and traveling around on the weekends trying to figure out where to set it. And when she said that, I thought, a tobacco plantation, that's perfect. That's what I was looking for. So anyway, to make a long story short, she was a huge help. And I went down there with my son, and the minute I set foot at Sotterley, I knew right away it was really hot that day. But, took a tour of the house. Oh my God, that house is so incredible, and they've kept it so beautifully. And the fact that they had renovated the cabin where the enslaved people slept was just like a perfect setting, just kind of handed to me. And I could see Aunt May up in that house while, the enslaved tobacco workers were all sleeping down in this tiny little house, and the oyster shells, and the whole tour that we got was I was just taking notes furiously. So and right on the shore of the Patuxent River. I mean, it was really, really an incredible. I still think about that tour to this day. It's just such a wonderful place. So anyway, that's how I found out about Sotterley, and this is kind of my fictionalized interpretation of Sotterley, which of course is Peeler Plantation. And it starts with Money Sunk Road, which is funny. My son-in-law, Chase Altenburn, he was telling me that his grandmother grew up on a former plantation, and they had a road called Money Sunk, because they had sunk so much money into building, the plantation and everything. So I thought, I need to borrow that. So that's Money Sunk Road. And then Peeler Lane takes you to Peeler Plantation, which looks suspiciously like Sotterley. And that is where Anne May lives. And, not a nice person. And I think Holly did a beautiful job. The smokehouse, which is such a sad place where Celeste, meets such horrible abuse. What else is on there? It's fun to go back and look. Oh, the tobacco barn. And I love that she did the path through the woods, and it goes past the farmer's barn, and over to Ambrosia Plantation, which is next door, which doesn't exist, but that was an indigo plantation. And that's where Charlene Tidwell Weed's house is. And that's where Gemma's sister, Patience, is enslaved. She's rented out, which I didn't realize until I dug into it, that they would rent out some of their enslaved people to, other places. But I love that I asked Holly to make the dogs tougher. She made the dogs in the dog bin. I don't know if you can see that. She made them look very sweet, but in the book, they're like these slobbering mastiffs. So I tried to get her to make the dogs look a little less like, cute puppies. But anyway, and then the spider tree. The spider tree is, very important in the book too. What it doesn't show is in town where Jubal Smalls lives. he is in May's love interest and not a good guy.
Yeah. Oh, there was one question from Catherine. Did you see any ghosts on your tour? She remembers going there.
Ooh, that's such a, did you say she saw ghosts?
She said she went there on a fourth grade field trip, and that was something that the tour guides talked about.
You mean
fourth
when
graders.
she was in fourth grade, or when her kids were in fourth grade?
No, she said she went there in fourth grade.
Wow, so she grew up in that area.
Mhm.
No, I didn't see any ghosts, but I wish I had been more open to it. Maybe I was just too busy, running around. Because I do think sometimes you have to kind of, be available to the spirits. But that's funny that she went in fourth grade. Yeah. No, I did not see any ghosts, and I'm really mad that I didn't. I wish I had. I'm dying to see ghosts. I did go down around Atlanta. It was very creepy because there was one former plantation that was more like an in-town plantation house. And they said that the women that ran it, like the tour guides, one of them saw a ghost for real, shimmering, and was so afraid that she turned around and ran out and left the other tour guide, who had no idea, they didn't see anything. But it was really interesting. And so I'm curious what, I think Catherine said that someone saw a ghost there. I'm wondering what it looked like.
Yeah. Oh, look, I could have sworn I saw a woman in a bonnet in the window, but it may have been my overactive imagination. And Nancy says you should come back to Sotterley for the annual ghost tour, which is around Halloween.
Oh
Okay.
my goodness.
Speaking
I
of,
need to do that. That would be
Yeah.
so fun.
Okay, so speaking of Sotterley, here are some pictures of actual Sotterley. It's a National Historic Landmark. And this is the big manor house. And this smaller picture of the white building with the chimney is the slave quarters, which is very, very small for a lot of people. And you can see the blue in the background, which is the Patuxent River.
That's a beautiful vantage point to take the picture from.
It's beautiful ground. So I can see why it really, sparked your imagination. So what's the significance of the title Sunflower Sisters?
Well, I can't say I titled Lilac Girls. Once Random House titled it Lilac Girls. I had named it, what was it? The Rabbits of Ravensbrück, which, thank God they rescued me from that title. But at the time I was very, very, very connected. But once I saw that Lilac Girls was such a big hit, I realized, oh, I guess, I shouldn't have been so connected to the Rabbits of Ravensbrück, because I don't know if anybody would have read that. So once that was a flower title, and that happened because my editor, we were at lunch, and I was kind of crabbing about not being able to grow lilacs down in Atlanta. And she said, because I said they require a harsh winter and in order to bloom. And she said, why don't we call it Lilac Girls? Because they had to go through a harsh winter in order to bloom as well. And I thought, okay. And I'm glad that she did that, because I think it turned into, it kind of added a whole layer in Lilac Girls, this kind of motif of flowers and lilacs that I think people really enjoyed. So I wanted to do that in Lost Roses. So I picked a rose as a flower, and then I thought, what flower can I use for this book? And it was really tough. And people at book events and events like this would say a daisy, or, they would give me ideas. But then I saw online in my research that sunflowers were a symbol in the Underground Railroad for danger whenever they wanted to. And this from reading the book, but whenever they there was a place where they wouldn't want people to go, enslaved people that were fleeing, they would tie sunflower sisters to sunflowers to a tree or a gate where they weren't supposed to go. It was supposed to be like a knowing eye that that symbolized danger. So when I read that, I thought, okay, that's definitely, you know, my flower.
Oh, that's great. And the Underground Railroad is a great tie-in because in St. Mary's County, we have 3 spots that are part of the Underground Railroad Network to Freedom Trail. That's part of the National Park Service. And this shows, here's a picture of our county for anyone viewing who's not here in St. Mary's County. This is the southern tip of Southern Maryland, and we're a peninsula. And this top red star is where historic Sotterley is. It's right on the Patuxent River. And that's one of our 3 Network to Freedom sites because this was an origin story for a lot of enslaved people seeking their freedom. We also have in Leonardtown, which is the old jail is there because when freedom seekers were captured, they were often held in jail as prisoners. And our last site is down at the very tip of the peninsula. It's Point Lookout. And this also figures very prominently in your story, Martha. Now, were you able to visit Point Lookout when you came here?
I was not, unfortunately. I feel like I need to go back and visit again. But later I found out when I was reading all of those letters that I had really missed an opportunity because the Woolsey women had actually served as nurses down there. And so I instantly put scenes into the book that that dramatized that, because I thought, how weird is that I chose Sotterley out of the blue and Point Lookout was right there. It just seemed like another one of those kind of like serendipity moments. And I'm so glad that I did because I put Gemma there. That was not historically accurate, but Georgiana was there and was nursing soldiers there. So I just thought it was such an interesting place too, how there you are, the colored troops and yeah, all of that was, and I put Abigail Hopper Gibbons in too, because I thought she was such an interesting person, and she's in all of the letters. She was a good friend of the Woolseys, so it all kind of just like came together.
That's so amazing, because this picture, the color picture here, is showing the Hammond General Hospital. That's where Georgiana worked, and Abigail Hopper Gibbons, absolutely historical figures. This whole hospital is not here anymore because this peninsula is now covered by water.
Oh, really?
But also down at Point Lookout was the prisoner of war camp. And you mentioned the U.S. colored troops in your story, and we have this statue here. And also the contraband camp, which was escaped enslaved people who would congregate there hoping to move on. And it's just amazing how this all kind of fit into your story, even if you weren't planning on it from the beginning.
It's almost like somebody else was up there, you know, pulling the strings.
It does feel that way.
It's so interesting though. How did it get to be underwater?
You know what? I don't know. I think the maybe the tide is. I don't know, because it was well.
Christine, I can answer that if you want me to. This is Karen.
That's right. Oh, Karen, we have our museum division person
here.
Yeah,
it's natural erosion, shifting sands. It's a tidal area. So the waters just come and go. It's a very violent area because it's where the Potomac runs into the Chesapeake Bay. So there has just been a lot of erosion and land loss there and all over the county. You know, the original founding island, St. Clement's Island, is about 40 acres now. It was 400 acres when they first landed there in 1634. So it's a natural phenomenon.
Wow, thank you for weighing in on that. That's so interesting. And you can tell from the picture that there's a lot of water on the other side as well. So maybe, you know, it was just too much and the erosion. Really interesting. Thank you for sharing.
I know. Thanks, Karen. That worked out great. Um, let's see. So I mentioned I'm a big fan of historical fiction, and it's really a great genre for making not only the history come alive, but explaining how the past is still relevant today. So along those same lines, what relevant lesson would you like people to take away from your books?
That's a tough one. You know, I never write with a lesson in mind, but I do just hope that, you know how they talk about history repeating itself and we have to be careful that it doesn't. I think that that's usually what I'm trying to show people. Things like in Sunflower Sisters, when the Irish had an uprising in New York City, and it was the largest uprising ever in the history of our country, and it lasted for 3 days. And they tried to kill the editor of the New York Times, who pulled a machine gun on them, on the troops, and they were upset that they had to go fight when a lot of the wealthier people that could pay $200 to get out of the fighting could do that, and the former slaves were working on the docks and undercutting them because they would work for less. So they were really upset, and you know, it was one of our first kind of insurgencies. So I think it's important just to go back and look at that and see if, you know, we can apply that to current day. They attacked an orphanage, and that's in the book, the Colored Orphanage. And none of the children were killed, but it was burned to the ground. And 4 Black people were lynched during that. So I just think that a lot of people have said, oh, I never even heard about that. And I remember reading about it in school, but I just think it's good to go back and revisit times in our history that we can learn from. You know, the same with the Holocaust and the same with the Bolshevik Revolution. I think we can take lessons from all of it.
And I do want to put one more thing in here. So whenever you do manage to come back to visit St. Mary's County again, here is a new thing that is talking about what you're talking about in a different way. Like you're an artist with words, so you know you bring the story out. We have this commemorative that was just finished a little over a year ago.
So beautiful.
It's amazing. It's the commemorative to enslaved people of Southern Maryland, and this site they found like remains or like artifacts from slave quarters, and they rebuilt it, and they used documents from the era, and that's what all these words are, but it's sort of like blackout poetry, so some of it is blacked out, but these are mirrors, so you can, you know, see into it, so it's reflection, and it's got names like right here, this is Tower Hill, and that was you might have seen that when you were at Sotterley, because that was one of the
I never did actually, no.
Yeah, just in one of their, you know, things that you can read on the wall. So it just brings it all to life in a different way.
Oh, it's an incredible memorial. I love it. And can you go inside, or is it just
No
outside?
You can just walk around the outside, and it's close to the road. It's close to historic St. Mary's City, which also has a lot of wonderful history. That'd be a great thing for you to visit when you're down here next too. This is kind of literally across the street. It's at the college, St. Mary's College of Maryland. But these are actually cutouts in the mirrors, and they light it at night, and then it projects the words on the ground. It's amazing.
It's just what they can do is just, it's a piece of art. It's so beautiful.
Yes. So I'm just going to stop the screen share here. And let me see.
Oh, I see someone said Point Lookout is also said to be haunted. Very haunted. Ooh,
Yes,
scary.
right. Oh, here's a question. Did you change the name of Sotterley to Peeler because the Woolseys weren't actually there, or was there another reason?
Yeah, I figured I wanted to fictionalize it because they had no connection to, like, I didn't want to put my fictional person in there when there had actually been real people that lived there. So I all along was going to fictionalize someplace, but yeah, I'm glad I chose that one because it just kind of came alive in my brain.
Um, so your first book, Lilac Girls, it did become a New York bestseller and it was your first book which I think is so impressive. But how long did it take you to write it?
Oh my goodness. About 10 years, 5 of that was just research. And I had no idea that I was going to write a book. I I was a journalism major in college and I didn't really it just wasn't on my radar. But I was just curious about Caroline and that house and that story. And back in those days, you could go down into the archives and research as much as you wanted to if you were, a researcher. And so that's what I would do is just go, and she kept everything. She was such a pack rat. So I was really lucky. And she's got these gorgeous rose books, and I love gardening. So, and all those letters. I never dug into the letters until I started writing the third book. But yeah, I would just hang out down there. It was just, it was therapeutic in a way. And then once I moved down to Atlanta and had my caffeinated experience, then it took me 5 years because I was trying to figure out how to write a book to begin with, which is really hard, honestly. I thought, oh, how hard could that be? But yeah, it's hard. And then all the travel going, for Lilac Girls, Paris and other places, Germany. And I actually went to Ravensbrück twice. So it was a lot. So yeah, 5 years, but 10 altogether.
Wow. But then for Lost Roses and Sunflower Sisters, it wasn't quite as long.
Yeah, by then I had figured out you have to write an outline because my first book, Lilac Girls, I did not have an outline at first. And I wrote all these little index cards and they were always all over the place. And then I realized, oh, I think I read on a blog or something that writers have, they have outlines. And so I made a giant one. And for every book since then, I've done my giant outline. And yeah, that's the most fun part, because once the outline is written, then it's almost like the book is written in a way. You just have to kind of plug in the scenes. So the other two books went more quickly because I didn't have to do all the background. Like I already had all, especially for Lost Roses, I had been down in those archives so long. I really knew Caroline's mother and also the Wolseleys as well. There's so many pictures down there. I used to just spend days, going through her family stuff. And so I felt like I knew the family well.
That's great. Now, I think that are you done writing about the Woolsey family?
I am. Yes, I've moved on. Now I'm writing about, my next thing is about Ravensbrück in a way. It goes back to Lilac Girls. It's not a sequel, but my editor's calling it like Lilac Girls on steroids. But it's two women who have, they were working in the French underground and became known as the Golden Doves. And one American girl whose father was an ambassador and got stuck there during the war, and a French girl. And they are arrested and taken to Ravensbrück, and each loses something very precious. The American girl loses her mother there, and the French girl loses her child. So the story picks up 8 years later, and both of them have been liberated. And the American girl is working at Fort Bliss, Texas, in Army intelligence, trying to figure out which former Nazis are brought to the United States to work in the aerospace program, like Werner von Braun. And she gets the opportunity to, and she's always on the lookout for this Dr. Snow, this bad doctor that did terrible things to them at Ravensbrück. And then she gets the opportunity to, her boss says, do you want to go find Dr. Snow? And she says, yes. And she goes out into, the field, which in this book is Vienna and Rome and Paris, to try and find Dr. Snow. And she has vengeance on her mind. And then the French girl, she lost her child at Ravensbrück and is still dealing with it 8 years later, when someone comes into the cafe and where she works as a waitress and says, I think I know where your son is. So it follows these two women who eventually become the Golden Doves again and work together to find this bad doctor.
Well, that sounds great. So where are you in the process with that one?
I just passed in my third draft of that to my editor. Yeah. So I hope, we're getting close to the end, but every time we do it, revisions, it gets just better and better. And then I have a thriller that comes out after that, which is based in my own house, which is really scary. And my husband is not happy with me because I'm afraid to go in the basement, as I've written about my own house. And
oh no,
did you have to write it about our house? Because now we have to move. But it's been really fun though, writing about my own town, and that is thinly disguised.
Oh.
As, I think in the book I call it Liberty, Massachusetts, but it's actually my town, Litchfield, Connecticut. I couldn't say that it was Litchfield. I don't know. It was just too close.
So that one's present day, right? So you're
Present day, yeah, that's been really fun. Just one, I'm whittling my way down to, just one point of view character.
Oh, that's right. Because that one is 2, and then you'll have 1.
Yeah, my agent was like, no more 3 characters. I was like, she just thinks I need to branch out and do new things, which she's probably right.
Is that hard to give up the style that's been working?
No, well, yeah, actually, I had kind of a format down, and yeah, but I think that was the natural time to do it because there were 3 books and that's kind of a set. And then, moving on, I could just do 2 point of view characters. And then, the thrillers are such a whole different thing anyway, that it makes sense to just, go to 1 point of view character.
Oh, that seems like, a really good organic progression for that.
So. Well, we'll see if people like them. We'll see. I think.
Oh, yeah.
So far, my beta readers are liking them. So.
Oh, that's great. There's a question. Were there letters from the Russian ladies as well as what the Woolseys had written?
There were some letters, but nowhere near as many as, the 1,000 Woolsey letters. That was crazy. And some of the Russian letters were in Russian. So Caroline could read them because she took Russian. At the house, they have at her desk, a different desk in one of the bedrooms, they have all her school books, and her mom had her learning Russian. And so it's really interesting to see that. But yeah, I couldn't read them because I don't know Russian, but there were a couple of letters. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting Russian stuff in the Bellamy Faraday house that I always wondered, like the Russian icons, those beautiful silver, a Madonna cut out of the silver. And I realized in my research that Caroline had donated all of these Russian pieces of clothing, really beautiful pieces of clothing, to the Metropolitan Museum. And I knew she was an actor. So I thought, oh, those must have been costumes. But now that I realize her mother's connection to the Russian women, they were clothes that the Russian women probably gave Eliza. And I think on my website, you can see some of the pieces. They're absolutely beautiful.
Oh. I think I missed one question way at the beginning. Oh, did you see historical reference of a train station in Leonardtown, or did you make that up?
I think I made that up. Yeah. Sorry, Leonardtown.
Okay. Well, it was
sometimes I have to do
important.
that. You know, I may have found some historical reference to it. Did you ever have a railroad?
I don't know.
Maybe I thought that since it was, oh, is someone saying that?
Elizabeth is.
Hi, I'm a librarian too. We did. I don't know a lot about it, but it was during, I believe, World War II. Karen probably knows better than me. But we did have a railroad that went down to the base when they built the base, the Naval Air Station. There was a railroad running down there, and I believe it was during World War II. I'm not sure how long it was there. It didn't go through Leonardtown, I don't think, but that's not far off from Leonardtown.
Maybe that's what I would, but that started in World War II?
Yes, Elizabeth is right. It came in with the Naval Air Station when it was built for World War II, but it was not a big deal. It did not go through Leonardtown, and it didn't last very long.
So yes, I made it up.
But it's okay. We should have had a railroad.
You have a fictitious one now, at least.
Yep. That's the nice thing about fiction. You can put in whatever you need to make the story work.
Absolutely.
Well, and it did make sense, and it didn't seem out of place that Leonardtown would have had a railroad.
Oh, good.
So it was not a glaring error.
Thank you, Karen.
We have the rail trail. I guess I should have thought of that, because they've like taken the track out and paved it. So we do have the rail trail. Oh yeah, that makes sense. I've walked on that. It's a bike path, like it's a nice wide thing. And they're working on extending it. So there we go. See, you learn more stuff about where you live when you have something like this, because you do wonder like, oh, was there a train here? I was wondering, because I don't live far from Hollywood. I was wondering where could Jubal Small's store have been? Well, that was in Hollywood.
I noticed, I loved that Hollywood was named because there were 2 holly bushes there. At least that's what I found in my research, which is hilarious. Like that's the claim to fame, is the 2 holly bushes.
Yep.
But you need to, right? Because they have to mate or something. So I had his store next to the holly, near the holly trees.
Hollywood holly.
Yeah.
The famous holly.
Is that still there? The Hollywood holly? Probably long gone, right? The holly trees.
Well, I have a holly tree in my yard.
It could be the one.
Maybe. Well, I live in Leonardtown.
It could be the famous one.
Maybe so. Okay. Oh, and then I have a comment. Someone says they're in a book club and they're reading the book Sunflower Sisters for this month. And I think it's an amazing book.
Oh, that's so nice.
It is nice.
I can talk to their book club if they want, but it might be too much Martha. This has already been, I'm already giving you all my good stuff. Might be, redundant for them.
Mm-hmm.
But
that's
I
a
hope
nice
they
offer.
enjoy it.
Oh, I'm sure. And I will say, I was looking through your website and you have a lot of neat things for book clubs, like questions and recipes. So I think that's really nice.
It's really nice. Random House does that. And they're always so smart about that, because people love to make the recipes for the book clubs. Mm-hmm. And we were talking before about how with Lost Roses, it seemed like everyone was drinking vodka when I would Skype with the book clubs. They were all, they were beyond talking about the book. It was more, it was a party. And then with Lost Roses, they would have like, I'm sorry, Lilac Girls, they would have lilac flavored martinis. They get creative with the alcohol for sure.
Oh, that's a great idea.
I don't know what Sunflower Sisters would be. Probably just like bad ale or something. Or maybe they drink brandy. Yeah, I think they drink brandy in Sunflower Sisters. So that's always good.
Okay. Well, we'll see what we can come up with. Dorothea asked, is there a date for the release of your next books?
No, there's no pub date yet, but it's spring 2023, which will be here before we know it. And I'm not sure. I think 2024 is supposed to be the thriller, but maybe we could do it sooner. I don't know. like do one in the spring and one in the fall.
Now you had mentioned when you and I were talking before, that it takes you like a whole year from when you finish to when it comes out. Is that why is that?
Yeah, I was surprised by that myself. When I first got into publishing, I thought, okay, well, you've accepted the manuscript and, you know, any month now, the book will be here. But it takes them a year to, you know, they need that runway to develop a cover, to get the sales team out there selling things in. And I think that now I understand that it takes a long time, and they have to, you know, they've got these grids that like a big place like Random House, they've got all these books and you have to like get your slot and hold on to it. So I get it now.
So how did things change for you when your first book was so successful and it was a New York Times bestseller? What was that like?
Oh, it was crazy. It was just, I mean, so surreal. I really, even now, I just pinch myself when I think about it. It changed in every possible way. My family all of a sudden was way nicer to me. You know, I had been mom before, and you know, everything was all about the kids and my husband who traveled a lot. He worked at the Weather Channel and it was a big deal. And so I finally kind of got my own, I know it sounds kind of, I don't know, way too, I don't know how it sounds, but I all of a sudden had the focus on me and the family, which was kind of fun. And before I had to, my husband always would read my manuscripts, but my kids were a little bit more like, you know, okay. But once they knew that it was going to be a published piece of work, they were way more into, you know, giving me their feedback about it. And, you know, which characters they wanted me to keep alive and whatever. So they got into it too. And I felt like they kind of, I know it sounds crazy, but respected me more. And, you know, before I was just kind of there, and now they thought I was kind of a big deal, which was really fun. And I got more power in my family. Really, I guess this is too much information, but I really wanted a dog. And my husband was saying, you know, we really shouldn't have a dog. Blah, blah, blah. And I said, I want a dog. And so we got a dog. So I felt like, you know, I could kind of wield some power once I was contributing, you know, income wise and notoriety wise. I think, you know, it was really fun. And sometimes I, you know, think, was that really smart to get a dog? No. I was going on book tours and things, and we had to like board him. And, you know, you heard him barking before, you know, he's an insane dog, but we, you know, love him to pieces. But yeah, I get more of a voice in my, you know, relationships. So it really was great. And then we moved back up here, and we moved very close to Caroline's house. And in this community, oh my God, people are like, Martha, you know, they think that, you know, it's a big deal that I live here. So I hate to tell them, you know, I'm just, you know, ordinary me, but they get very excited about, you know, book events, and like a local celebrity, I guess, but, you know, I don't feel that way, but they act that way. So it's fun. It's really fun to go out to dinner and have people be like, you know, I loved your book. And, you know, it makes me feel, you know, my family goes, wow, Mom, you know, people know you. It's like, well, maybe two in the town, but it doesn't matter. So it's fun.
Well, as a matter of fact, Ashley said Lilac Girls is her favorite book, and I've not been disappointed since. Excited for your next book.
Oh, that's so nice. Thanks, Ashley.
And as you were talking about like that you kind of have found your own voice, I was thinking you're becoming one of the characters in your own books because you have such powerful, like strong women characters, which are great. And Nancy also had a follow-on comment like that. She says, I do not think determinedness is necessarily a word, but it describes the female characters and makes for great discussions about the books and lives today.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I think that we crave that, especially today when we feel a little powerless sometimes. I was just watching the morning show, and on, you know, with Jennifer Aniston and Reese Witherspoon, and, you know, they they do the same thing. They're strong women who finally get a voice. And I think that, that's long overdue for us.
So Dorothea asks, how do you pick the names for your characters? I just remember reading Lilac Girls and seeing my name and always had this question.
Dorothea? Wait, who was Dorothea in Lilac Girls? Isn't that terrible that I can't remember?
As I read it, I didn't recall.
But it's just, what does she say? It was the horrible doctor. Oh my God. Sorry, Dorothea.
I thought her name was Herta.
Her name's Herta Oberhauser, but maybe there was another Dorothea. Oh, you're talking about Binns, Dorothea Binns. She was a real person. Or some horrible person, some horrible woman.
She was the guard, right?
She was the guard, Dorothea Binns. She is in my next book too. Yeah, I just can't get rid of
she was historical.
She was a real person. Yeah.
Okay. And so some names are
some of them were just, they came ready-made with a name, which was super helpful. But others, I just, sometimes you just have a feeling for them. In Sunflower Sisters, it's great because, all the sisters had names already. And there's so many really fun other Civil War kind of names like Jubal Smalls. And I just kind of cruise around and keep a list of like great Civil War men's names, Polish names, those kind of things. So I just usually go to my list and just grab something. But a name is such an important thing when you think about it. Scarlett O'Hara, it really sets the tone.
Yes. Okay. Well, I think I got all of our questions and we're right at 7:30.
Yay!
So yeah, I know.
So fun. And thank you, Catherine. She's about halfway. I hope I haven't given any spoilers. She's only halfway through. It's neat to read the parts of the book that are set where I grew up and still live. Yes. I'm so glad. This has been so much fun talking to you.
Thank you. I'm thrilled that you were willing to be part of this.
Anytime. This is so fun. And I have to get down there again one of these days and we'll all get together again. That once COVID's over, knock on wood.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that would be nice. You can stop by the library. It's practically brand new. It's almost 2 years old now, but because we have a new librarian.
Oh, wow. And I'll go see the jail. I've always wanted to see the jail.
That would be great.
From the outside.
We'll give you a special tour.
Really? Ooh,
sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, Karen's the head of the museum division. She can totally arrange that.
That would be so fun. Well, thank you so much, Christine. You've been amazing. Those slides, oh my God. I feel like I've been there. It's just amazing.
Oh, I'm glad you liked it. And it was really our honor. Thank you all for coming tonight. And thank you again, Martha.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for having me.